"The document you're looking at," the journalist said, her voice steady as she stared into the camera, broadcasting to millions, "is a secret ledger. It doesn't detail infrastructure spending. It details a slush fund, a fund that leads directly back to the speaker's closest allies." The camera zoomed in on the spreadsheet, the names and numbers stark under the studio lights. In that moment, an empire of deceit began to crumble. The air in the House Oversight Committee hearing room was thick with a familiar, toxic brew of ambition and animosity. Sunlight streamed through the tall, arched windows, but it offered no warmth, only a harsh glare on the polished mahogany and the tense faces of those assembled. At the center of it all, a single man, Secretary of Transportation David Reeves, sat alone at the witness table, a proverbial lamb brought forth for slaughter. And the wolf was hungry. Speaker Nancy Pelosi, perched on her elevated seat, radiated an icy authority. Every line of her impeccably tailored suit, every carefully controlled gesture, was designed to project power. She leaned into the microphone, her voice dripping with a condescending venom that she reserved for her most despised political adversaries. "Mr. Secretary," she began, the honorific sounding like an insult on her lips, "let's be clear for the American people. President Trump's American Renewal Infrastructure Project, the one you are so passionately defending, allocates an unprecedented sum to a series of contracts in my home state of California. Can you explain why this particular project, which seems to benefit a handful of the president's known associates, is being prioritized over, say, hospitals or schools?" Secretary Reeves, a man chosen by Trump for his quiet competence and backbone of steel, did not flinch. "Madam Speaker, with all due respect, the project prioritizes collapsing bridges, outdated electrical grids, and congested ports that are crippling our national supply chain. The companies chosen won their bids through a transparent, merit-based process. This isn't about enriching allies, it's about rebuilding America." Pelosi let out a small theatrical laugh. "Rebuilding America? Or rewarding donors? You speak of a transparent process, yet your office has refused to provide the detailed financial disclosures we've requested. What are you hiding, Mr. Reeves? Is it because this entire project is nothing more than a slush fund, a way to funnel taxpayer dollars to the president's friends?" The accusation hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. It was a lie, and everyone in the room knew it was a lie, but it was a politically brilliant one. It was simple, scandalous, and perfectly tailored for the evening news. The cameras flashed, catching the beads of sweat on Reeves's forehead. He was a good man, an engineer, not a brawler. He was floundering, drowning in the speaker's malicious, calculated assault. Pelosi saw it. She leaned in for the kill. "The American people deserve to know if their money is being used to build a monument to this administration's corruption," she thundered. "They deserve to know if you and the president are treating the United States Treasury like your own personal piggy bank." From the White House, President Donald Trump watched the hearing on a television in the Oval Office. He wasn't angry, he was focused. He had seen this play before. Pelosi didn't care about the facts. She cared about the narrative. She was creating a cloud of suspicion so thick that the actual vital project would suffocate beneath it. He had received quiet intelligence briefings, whispers of deep-seated rot in California's state contracting system, but he had no hard proof. He knew Pelosi's opposition was about something more than politics, but he couldn't prove it. "She's not just blocking a bill," Trump said to his chief of staff, his voice a low growl. "She's protecting something." He picked up the phone. "Get me everything we have on those state contracts. Everything." The day wore on, and Pelosi's narrative dominated the airwaves. By evening, the slush fund scandal was the leading story on every major network. Secretary Reeves was portrayed as a bumbling, evasive functionary and Trump as the corrupt puppet master. It was a masterclass in political assassination, and Pelosi was basking in the glow of her apparent victory. But in a quiet, sterile office, deep within the labyrinthine structures of California's state government, a conscience was stirring. A mid-level accountant, a man who had spent 15 years rubber-stamping fraudulent expense reports and watching kickbacks flow into the pockets of the powerful, had finally reached his breaking point. He watched the news, saw the good and necessary federal project being torched to protect the very corruption he had enabled with his silence. He thought of his children and the crumbling country they were set to inherit, With trembling hands, he copied a single encrypted file onto a thumb drive. It was the real ledger. The California ledger. It had nothing to do with Trump's project and everything to do with a shadow budget controlled by a handful of Pelosi's most powerful political allies. It detailed 2 decades of graft, lavish consulting fees, no-show jobs for relatives, state contracts awarded to shell companies that kicked back millions. It was the lifeblood of a political machine, and its exposure would be catastrophic. The accountant knew he couldn't go to the authorities. They were all part of the same machine. He couldn't go to the mainstream media. They would bury it to protect their political champion. He needed someone independent, someone fearless. He thought of Sarah Jensen, a journalist who had built her career on speaking truth to power regardless of party. He sent an anonymous, encrypted email. "I have something you need to see. It's the real slush fund, and it has nothing to do with the president." Sarah Jensen received the email just after 9 p.m. Intrigued, she agreed to a dead drop. An hour later, she held the thumb drive in her hand. For the next 4 hours, fueled by black coffee and a burning sense of purpose, she and her small team verified the data. They cross-referenced names, traced shell corporations, and confirmed the authenticity of the transactions with confidential sources. It was all there. A bombshell. A story that would not only exonerate the president, but would detonate at the very heart of his chief antagonist's power base. Just after 1 a.m., Sarah Jensen went live. "Good evening," she began, her face grim, her voice ringing with the clarity of truth. For the past 12 hours, Washington has been consumed by accusations of a presidential slush fund. But tonight, we have obtained a document that tells a very different story. The real story. She didn't just report. She narrated a story of systemic corruption. She showed the flowcharts, the bank transfers, the names. She methodically, brilliantly, dismantled the narrative Pelosi had spent all day building. And in its place, she erected a monument to the speaker's own staggering hypocrisy. In her palatial Georgetown home, Nancy Pelosi watched in horror. The color drained from her face. Her arrogant smirk, so confident just hours before, had vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Her phone began to ring, a frantic, incessant chorus of doom from the very allies whose names were now splashed across the screen. She didn't answer. There was nothing to say. She had been exposed. President Trump watched the broadcast from the treaty room of the White House. He felt a quiet, profound sense of vindication. His instincts had been right. This was never about a bridge or a port. It was about protecting a criminal enterprise. The next morning, the political world was in ashes. Pelosi was in hiding, her office issuing frantic, unbelievable denials. But the ledger was out. The truth was out. President Trump walked into the White House briefing room. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted. But he projected an aura of complete and total command. He wasn't there to gloat or to attack. He was there to lead. "Yesterday," he began, his voice firm and steady, "we witnessed a vicious political attack designed to mislead the American people and to stop the vital work of rebuilding our nation. It was an attack rooted in lies, and its purpose was to protect a deeply corrupt system." He looked directly into the camera, his gaze piercing. "This isn't a Republican or a Democrat issue. This is an American issue. For too long, powerful people in this city have treated your tax dollars like their own private fund, all while our infrastructure crumbles and our country suffers. The revelation of the California ledger is a painful but necessary wake-up call," he continued, his voice resonating with moral authority. "We will build our roads, our bridges, and our ports. We will pass this infrastructure bill, and we will do it with more transparency and more federal oversight than ever before. We will drain the swamp. The events of the last 24 hours have shown us exactly where to begin." He left the podium without taking questions. He didn't need to. He had won. The infrastructure bill, once stalled, was now unstoppable, with dozens of shell-shocked Democrats pledging their support, desperate to distance themselves from the blast radius of Pelosi's scandal. Nancy Pelosi's power was not just broken, It was shattered. Her arrogance had led her to overplay her hand, and in her malicious attempt to destroy her rival, she had inadvertently engineered her own spectacular downfall. Trump, through intelligence, strength, and a steadfast refusal to bow to a false narrative, had achieved a total and undeniable victory. The swamp had been exposed, and the work of cleaning it out had just begun. What do you think was the most critical mistake Nancy Pelosi made in this story? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more compelling narratives.